Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back on the second update 1.87 dev server, and it's time to have a look at the Type 1936A mob. And this is a new German destroyer which is looking to breach the gap between destroyers and also light cruisers. You can find it here as an extension on the rest of the destroyers in rank 3, and as you can see it's at 4.7, so it's now between the pre-existing 4.3 destroyer and of course the 5.0 light cruiser. At rank 3, this means that it's going to take ages to get this thing, and the question is it worth it? Well, let's have a look at its guns. The first thing to understand is it has 5 150mm guns, very well armoured, or very well armament-wise armoured for a destroyer. You've got 2 150s on the front, and then you have a set of 3 150s on the back. It also has 2 sets of dual-mounted 37mm, 4 20mm flak 38s, and 2 quad 20mm, which you can find a lot of them in the center here. So you have, of course, stuff like the 37s here, you've got the 20mm, you also have the quads back here, and also forward. So the Aaa capabilities of this aircraft are incredibly strong. And that is good, you know, with the fact that air is becoming incredibly prominent in naval. The fact that you get a ton of aircraft with torpedoes and bombs running around, the Aaa component is very much required for these larger ships. It also has a crew of 343, which is a decent size, and also 8 torpedo tubes in the center, which can both fire both ways, which makes me incredibly happy. One of the problems I've encountered while using some of the destroyers, the one which always springs to mind is the G-Class, is the annoyance of the torpedoes because of this little area here. Basically, this has a very limited range, whereas this has a much more extended range on how you can throw them. Also on stuff like the Tribal class, where it only has 4 destroyers. As somebody who is a mainly arcade player, when it comes to naval, it is very nice to see 8 torpedoes so I can refresh them and use them to guard areas. So the main thing is these 150mm, right? These are something which have to be looked at. The HE round, 71mm a pen, which is okay. The other round is also a HE round. The difference between them is that this has a little bit less explosive mass, but it has more of a fuse delay. So the idea is it hits and then explodes, whereas this will explode instantaneously. I'm guessing that's the idea. So technically this should be able to do more damage. Then of course you have the distance fuse, which will kind of do the same thing. On top of this, you have the 37mm, so you have the HE, which only pens 15, and then 65mm for the APC-BC. I feel like the secondary guns on this machine are going to be used just against AA though. You're going to let the 150mm do the work against the other ships, while everything else is dedicated for AA. At least that's how I see it. The armor on this is pretty much non-existent. The only armor you have is for the actual turrets themselves, and also for the quad mounts here. So if you're wondering about belt armor, or you're wondering about survivability after a light cruiser puts a big round into you, well, that don't exist. The X-ray view will show you how the engines are laid out. You can see there's actually, it's kind of cool how they've actually made them here. How you have like kind of a deck along with the engines. Well, not a deck, but you know, like a walkway, I think would be the best way to put it. And then of course the smoke funnels as well. 2 of them in total, and I think going after this one is probably better. Well, the engines are really nice, and then you have a huge ammo storage in the front, which is connected to the bridge for some reason. I'm guessing that this is misaligned. Hopefully this is a bug and that it will be fixed. Otherwise, the crew will be eating 150mm shells instead of them being fired out of the guns in the front. On the back, we have kind of the same thing, where an ammo elevator isn't really going to anywhere unless these are manually loaded, which they may be, you know. That could be a thing that is possible. it's got its steering gear. But for me, this thing is a huge target when it comes to this ammo storage at the front and also the engines. So once you knock out the engines, you obviously knock out the speed, which is quite good on this machine, and you knock out its maneuverability. And for a machine which has no armor, you need to use that speed, you need to use that maneuverability. If we look at customization, unfortunately it doesn't exist, so let's have a look. And in the test sale, I suppose, the biggest issue I see with this ship is a similar issue that I see with a lot of ships. So the problem is its main guns, even though they are large caliber, HE guns after all. 150 millimeters. They throw 3 sets of HE shells. What we have seen over the last few updates with light cruisers is a massive increase in the amount of armor that these machines are getting. And what that means is that your HE shells, which only pen 70 millimeters, will do not a lot against these larger ships. So therefore AP is required. The best way I personally think about it is against destroyers like this machine over here, right? The 150 millimeters will do a ton of damage to it, or at least they should do, right? They should do an absolute metric ton of damage to those machines if you hit all of the rounds. The problem with a 4-7 destroyer is that you are getting so close to the cruiser level. You are getting up to the point of you're going to be facing cruisers over and over and over and over again. Your issues are not going to be with the destroyers, your issues are going to be with the light cruisers. You can see how, with 3 volleys, with one which pretty much didn't hit anything, so 2 volleys in a way of accurate shooting, we can do tons of damage to this destroyer and pretty much annihilate it. If you were accurate enough, or you had better crews than I did, you probably could easily annihilate it very quickly. But the main issue is not the destroyer I'm shooting here, right? It is not other destroyers. You should do really well against other destroyers. The issue is always going to be the thing that is sat to the left over there, which is of course the larger light cruisers, especially the ones which have all of this armor. There is not a lot you can do if you don't have these specific shells that you require to do damage to them. 71 millimeters of penetration may seem like a lot until you start running into stuff like the British ships, which have more than this around their collective areas. And then you've got the new light cruisers of 5.3, 5.7, or 5.3 I believe, which you will go into, and you won't be able to do damage to them. It's going to be very hard to do anything to them. And this is the problem. This is the inherent problem with naval when it comes to these types of ships. You can see here, non-penetration, non-penetration, non-penetration. The smoke funnels have no armor around them, but you can see we're doing a little bit of damage. The crews stayed the same, by the way, this whole time. But at all this time, he could be firing his massive, huge guns at me, doing a ridiculous amount of damage because I have no armor on this thing. And speed only gets you so far when it comes to these machines. You can see the acceleration and maneuverability on this is really good for a destroyer. It's incredibly good. And we're in Naval Realistic right now in the test sale. But that doesn't save you as much as you may think it does. At least when it comes to naval battles against these larger ships. At range, yes. But at some point you're going to have to go to the cap circles. At some point you're going to have to move forward. At some point you're going to run out of torpedoes that you fire. And at some point, if you decide, that you are just going to stay at the back and snipe with these big 150s, which are doing quite a lot, apart from against light cruisers, you will find that yes, you can do a lot of damage, but you won't be able to influence the game, and your team will lose. Because you won't be able to capture the points. The light cruisers will push forward. The planes will come and bomb you and torpedo you. And yes, you have some wonderful, absolutely wonderful sets of AA, which I'm sure will get used by many players to great effect. But you'll eventually die. So the question is, for these 4.7 destroyers, and the question that I've been trying to rack my brain with for the last maybe half a year since Naval has come out, can these destroyers go up against light cruisers? And can smaller boats go up against destroyers? And at the end of the day, can you convince somebody or give somebody a reason to use this machine over the Kern? Or this machine over the new, the Nürnberg, right? Is there a reason to do it? The only reason I can think of is maneuverability. And I think it's a good reason. I do. Especially if you're in arcade. Because it means you can dodge, dip, and dive. You've got good AA support. That's another thing on this. So there are reasons out there. But from the core fundamental mechanics of naval, it's very hard to think of one where you can convince somebody to use this. A good analogy that was brought up last night when people were chatting was, if you have a worse vehicle in ground forces, you generally have something going on with it. So, scouting is a thing. Maybe you get access to artillery. Maybe you get access, maybe it's done by spawn points, Maybe it's, it's cheaper to use that vehicle. Therefore, you are able to get into a plane quicker, and use different vehicles. The problem is with ships, you don't have that. You don't have that idea. So it is literally a mano-a-mano, let's see who batters people, and let's see who does it well. And for me, in that scenario, there is no reason to take this over something like a Kern, or an Emden, or a Nürnberg. And the fact that it is where it is on the tree, right at the end of the destroyer line, unless you're forcing people to unlock every destroyer to be able to get light cruisers, I feel like this is going to be criminally underplayed, even though it has some really nice stuff to it. As I said, really nice speed, really nice maneuverability, and good guns, good main guns. But they're not as good as its contemporaries when it comes to the light cruiser class, and that is the problem. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.